We have lost hundreds and hundreds of rock stars over the decades. But who was the first rock star to die? To answer that question, we have to establish a year zero for the rock era, and that's contentious because the world didn't wake up one day and find that rock and roll had suddenly been born. But without getting too deep into the weeds of the arguments and debates, 1951 works very well for many reasons. So let's agree on that. Then we need to establish the definition of rock star. Again, if we accept the premise that Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley and the Comets was the very first across-the-board global mainstream rock hit, then that narrows things down to who died first. Danny Cedrone was a session musician. He played on a recording of the song Rocket 88 by Bill Haley and Saddlemen in 1951. That's a plus in his column because that's considered to be, or at least one of the versions of that song, is considered to be one of the very first rock and roll tracks. Bill Haley's Saddlemen morphed into Bill Haley and the Comets, and on April 12, 1954, Cedrone was with the Comets when they recorded Rock Around the Clock. That's him playing the guitar solo. Huge, huge hit. Tens of millions of copies sold. And Cedrone was paid $21 for his work that day. Haley liked Cedrone's work so much that he was invited to play on Shake, Rattle, and Roll later that year. No solo this time, but that is Cedrone on electric guitar. Again, big hit, and another seminal and highly influential rock and roll song. The date for that session was June 7th, 1954. 10 days later, 3 days short of his 34th birthday, Cedrone was dead. It appeared that he suffered a heart attack and fell down a flight of stairs and broke his neck. So by the criteria I've just outlined, Danny Cedrone was the first rock star to die. Rock stars die at all ages. Ritchie Valens was just 17 when he went down in that plane crash with Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper. The oldest? Well, that hasn't been determined yet. For some reason, though, we've become fixated on deaths that occur at a very, very specific age, 27. An entire mythology has grown around this magic number. So here's the question. Is this mythology justified? What evidence exists for it? And if so, what's so special and common about rock stars dying at the age of 27? We need to look into this. I'm Alan Cross, and this is episode 28 of Uncharted: Crime and Mayhem in the Music Industry. It's time to investigate the truth behind the 27 Club. The number 27 occupies an odd place in rock history. It's the age when rock stars die, or so the story goes. And if I'm honest, it does come up quite a bit. There are books on the subject, documentaries. The age of 27 has an eerie hold over popular culture. Even casual music fans think that this is when so many rock stars have died. Given the ubiquity of the 27 Club as a term, as a meme, anyone might guess that we're talking about dozens and dozens of deaths at that age. Just look how deeply the 27 Club is embedded into rock lore. It's morbid stuff, but who doesn't like stories that flirt with death? John Craigie wrote a song entitled 28 in 2009. He would later go on to produce a live album that was written from the perspective of Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, and Kurt Cobain, all people who died at the age of 27. Eric Burdon wrote a song called 27 Forever in 2013. A band called Magenta put out an album the same year entitled The 27 Club, and I could name half a dozen other similar works. The concept even comes up in the video game Hitman. One of the missions in the game is to kill an indie musician who is celebrating his, 27th birthday. And those are just a few pop culture references. There are plenty more. But is all this hype and legend and myth justified? Is it real? Or is it just some kind of media construct? Let's investigate. The first artist of the rock and roll era to die at the age of 27 was Jesse Belvin, a singer-songwriter who was part of an R&B doo-wop group called the Penguins. Belvin wrote this song, which sold 10 million copies in 1954, and he was just 21 at the time.
Earth angel, will you be mine, my darling dear?
On February 6, 1960, he was part of a show in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was the first integrated, and I mean non-segregated show in the city's history, and was marred by white people in the audience calling out racial slurs against the black performers. After the show, Belvin and his wife took off with a driver, but not far down the road there was a head-on collision that killed both of them. There were still questions about whether someone had tampered with Belvin's car. Police never investigated, and Belvin was 27 when he died that night. Over the following years, other 27-year-old musicians died. Jazz player Doug Watkins, car accident, 1962. Rudy Lewis, singer for the Drifters and one of the voices on the song Under the Boardwalk, died in his sleep, probably a drug overdose, also in 1962. R&B singer Joe Henderson, heart attack, 1964. Robin Roberts, an early member of the Wailers, car crash, 1967. Malcolm Hale of Spanky and Our Gang, possible carbon monoxide poisoning, 1968. And Dickie Pride, an English singer of some renown, drug overdose, 1969. All tragedies, to be sure, but the story of the 27 Club really begins on July 3, 1969, when Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones was found dead in his swimming pool. There are still a lot of questions surrounding what happened to him, including allegations that he was murdered. If you want to go deep into that mystery, check out episode 19 of Uncharted, where I explore all the facets of Brian Jones's death. At the time, the Rolling Stones were one of the biggest bands in the world, and for Jones, who had just been fired from the band, to die in such an ignominious way was big news. Rock star dies at 27. But a little more than a year later, Alan Wilson, the singer and harmonica player for Canned Heat, died of a drug overdose that may have been a suicide. He was also 27. About 2 weeks later, Jimi Hendrix took way too many barbiturates, passed out, and choked on his own vomit. He was also 27.
The Jimi Hendrix experience is over. The acid rock musician died today in a London hospital, apparently from an overdose of drugs. During his short career, Hendrix flailed his electric guitar into some of the most unusual sounds of an unusual music. A report now from ABC's Gregory Jackson.
If you're much over 30, the odds are you never heard of Jimi Hendrix, or only dimly, perhaps a loud voice on the car radio. But take it for fact, in just the past 4 years, Jimi Hendrix became one of the best-known, highest-paid artists in recording history, an astonishing performer whose on-stage gyrations could make Elvis Presley look like a PE teacher. And it may well be that the story of Jimi Hendrix is a small picture of the overall explosive power and wealth of rock. The son of a Seattle gardener, James Marshall Hendrix quit school at 16, but before he was 20, he was touring the country as a backup guitarist for other rock groups. In 1966, a manager discovered him in a Greenwich Village bar, took him to Europe, formed a group, and just 9 months later, Jimi Hendrix returned world famous. At rock festivals, Hendrix was paid $50,000 for a single performance. His album sold in the millions. He should have been a millionaire. It's not known whether he saved his money, but it is known that today, Jimi Hendrix is dead, an overdose. He was 28. This is Gregory Jackson, ABC News, New York.
A little more than a fortnight after that, Janis Joplin died of a heroin overdose in Los Angeles. She, too, was 27.
Janis Joplin, one of the better-known singers in the world of rock music, was found dead in her Hollywood apartment last night. The cause of death was said to be an overdose of drugs. Miss Joplin became a sensation when she appeared at the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967.
And then on July 3rd, 1971, Jim Morrison of The Doors was found dead in the bathtub of his Paris apartment. The verdict was heart failure brought on by heroin addiction. He was, yes, 27.
The death of another rock musician was disclosed today. Jim Morrison, 27 years old, lead singer of The Doors. His manager said Morrison died 6 days ago in Paris, either of a heart attack or pneumonia, but the death was kept secret to avoid a sensation. He was buried in Paris in the same cemetery where Balzac and other French immortals lie.
So those 4 deaths were enough to cause people to pause. 4 rock stars dead at the same age of 27? That's odd. Then it happened again in 1972 and 1973. Les Harvey, guitarist with Stone the Crows, was electrocuted on stage by an ungrounded microphone. It happened while he was performing. 27 years old. Pigpen McKernan of the Grateful Dead, complications from alcoholism, 27. 1975, Dave Alexander, the original bass player of the Stooges, a pulmonary edema caused by years of alcoholism. A couple of months later, Pete Ham of Badfinger hanged himself at the age of 27. Gary Thane, bass player with Uriah Heep, heroin overdose, 27. And in 1978, Chris Bell, a member of the seminal power pop group Big Star, died in a traffic accident. By the time we got to the 1980s, some people had taken note of the apparent phenomenon of rock stars dying at 27, but it still wasn't a legend. At most, it was just a statistical curiosity. And then, almost an entire decade went by without any famous musician kicking off at 27. Between the spring of 1979 and the end of 1989, out of all the tragic deaths that occurred, and there were many, I could only find a handful of cases where the deceased was 27. March 23, 1980, Jacob Miller of the reggae band Inner Circle died in a traffic accident. The next 27-year-old musician to die was Dee Boone of the Minutemen in 1985. That was another traffic accident. Finbar Donnelly of an Irish punk band called Five Go Down to the Sea. Ironically, he drowned at age 27. And after that, Echo and the Bunnymen drummer Pete DeFreitas drove his motorcycle into a car and died. He was 27. And that's it. People still talked about the cluster of deaths involving Hendrix, Joplin, and Morrison, but there was no chatter anywhere about anything called the 27 Club. Nothing in 1991 either, or 1992. The words 27 Club were never uttered. There was one notable 27-year-old to die in 1993, and that was Mia Zapata, singer for a Seattle alt-rock band called The Gits. She was raped and murdered on July 7th, 1993. That, though, was looked upon as a horrific crime. She was completely blameless in her death. The truth is, the modern lore of the 27 Club began on April 8th, 1994. And for that, we can thank Kurt Cobain's mother. Listen to this clip. It's me on the air that Friday reading the Wire story that confirmed Kurt Cobain had in fact died.
3:38, I really don't want to do this. This is the latest from Seattle. A record company official says Nirvana lead singer Kurt Cobain shot himself to death at his Seattle home yesterday. Police say Cobain's body was found today with a shotgun wound to the head, a suicide note nearby. He had been recuperating from last month's overdose of painkillers and champagne. His mother says Cobain has been missing for 6 days, and she says the last time she spoke with her son, she told him not to join the stupid club of other rock stars who had died early.
And there you have it. Wendy O'Connor, formerly Wendy Cobain, remarking about the stupid club. And this is where the whole thing about the 27 Club really begins. We'll pick things up there in a moment. Before Kurt Cobain died at the age of 27 in 1994, there was no formal designation of anything called the 27 Club. Plenty of rock stars had died earlier, and as I've documented, only a relatively few passed away at 27. What makes these 5 deaths, again that's just 5, extra notable, Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, and Kurt Cobain, was that they were all super famous and super influential. But any statistician or life insurance agent will tell you that a sample of 5 over 25 years is no sample at all. It's indistinguishable from random happenstance. However, a couple of things started coming together when Kurt died. First, the comment about the stupid club by Kurt's mom was widely picked up by the media. She must have known that many rock stars died young. I mean, Brian, Jimmy, Janis, Jim, that was her era, right? The media certainly interpreted, more likely misinterpreted, her comments as referring to those doomed 27-year-olds. Journalists and writers did the same thing. A pernicious thing crept into the narrative, that Kurt planned to die this way at this age. But was Wendy really referring to those specific rock stars who died 25 years earlier? Probably not. A better guess is that she was thinking of her family and how 2 uncles and a great uncle had also committed suicide. So it's very possible that that's the stupid club she had in mind. But once her comments were out there, her quote was analyzed again and again. Brian, Jimmy, Janice, and Jim were brought up, and so were many others. Andrew Wood, singer for Seattle's Mother Love Bone, died of a heroin overdose in 1990. Another Seattle musician, Stephanie Sargent of the band 7 Year Bitch, had died of a drug overdose in 1992. Both of them had passed away at the age of 24. But never mind. Another thing we have to consider is that in April 1994, the world was getting deeper and deeper into celebrity culture. The internet wasn't much of a thing yet, but celebrity gossip was enjoying a renaissance. Kurt's death was spectacularly tragic, and then the conspiracy theory started. Once that happened, people started to draw in all these disconnected threads, hoping to find an answer for the inexplicable. And as we got more and more online, more connected, and started spreading thoughts and theories, the notion of the 27 Club started coming together. We started doing our own research, and the list of 27 Club members quickly expanded, going back as far as a Brazilian classical musician named Alexander Levy, who died in 1892 at the age of, yes, 27. The list gathered up names like Robert Johnson, the legendary blues guitarist who died under mysterious circumstances in 1938. But it also included a king of rock, Jim Morrison's girlfriend, playwrights, actors, and sports personalities. The main focus, however, was on musicians. And yeah, it was tough to ignore the death of Kristen Pfaff, Courtney Love's bass player in Hole. She died of a drug overdose about 6 weeks after Kurt, and she was 27. The following February, this is 1995, Richie Edwards of the Manic Street Preachers disappeared off the face of the earth and has never been found. He was, 27. But then there was another long gap when it came to the deaths of 27-year-old rock stars. After the disappearance of Richie in 1995, no rock musician died at that age again until Jeremy Ward of the Mars Volta died of a heroin overdose in May 2003. That's a hiatus of 8 years. There were a couple of more after that. The guitarist of an industrial band called American Head Charge, an Australian deathcore musician, and, well, that's it. The next big loss to contribute to the 27 Club came on July 23, 2011, more than 17 years after Kurt. And that was Amy Winehouse. The circumstances of her death fit the narrative perfectly, and it sealed the modern notion of the 27 Club. Her story had all the drama. An exceptionally talented singer, commercially successful, critically lauded, a once-in-a-generation type of image. Not only were record sales and streams strong all over the world, but she also worked with fashion brands like Fred Perry. She amassed a net worth of close to £10 million, making her one of the richest British people under the age of 30. She was also big into charitable causes. For example, she donated £20,000 worth of clothes to London charity shops. She was an activist, protesting against gentrification, campaigning for breast cancer awareness, and working for climate change organizations. There were also quiet acts of kindness, like the time she paid £4,000 for a man in St. Lucia to have urgent surgery that he couldn't afford otherwise. But there was also the drinking and the drugs, the bad boyfriends and tumultuous family relationships, health problems like bulimia, mental illness issues, and occasional violent outbursts. Amy remarked on more than one occasion that she feared that she would die early. Amy was a paparazzi dream, always somehow making news for the wrong reasons. There was the downward spiral, the self-harm, the career crash. Every once in a while there was a glimmer of hope, the possibility of redemption. Maybe Amy could sort things out, get everything right again, and save herself. The British tabloids hounded her. It all came to an end sometime in the early morning hours of July 23, 2011, when she was discovered dead in her bed from apparent alcohol poisoning. Her blood alcohol level was 0.416, more than 5 times what would get you busted for drunk driving. And how old was Amy Winehouse when she died? 27.
The Brit and Grammy Award-winning singer Amy Winehouse has died at her home in North London. The 27-year-old had struggled with drink and drug problems for a number of years and recently finished a rehab course. She's most famous for her album Back to Black.
Amy's demise was immediately compared to that of Kurt, Jim, Janice, Jimmy, and Brian Jones. So, 6 major rock stars dying at the age of 27 at the height of their fame is enough to make a club. A small one, but arguably a club. And here we are. After Amy's death, the media construct of the 27 Club took off. Writers and bloggers started looking for more people who died at that age. Others brought in other entertainers, painter Jean-Michel Basquiat, actors Jonathan Brandis and Anton Yelchin, a couple of porn stars, some sports figures, Elvis Presley's grandson. Everywhere we turned, we were told that musicians and celebrities in general had a thing about dying at age 27. So, was there something to support this? If so, what was the evidence? And if there is supporting evidence, please explain it to me. That's where we'll go next. Stand by. Here is the central question of this episode. Is there really a 27 Club? Is there something special and dangerous about that age when it comes to rock stars? Or is all this just some sort of coincidence? There are several theories about what's actually going on. First, there's the fact that many rock stars do see their careers peak in their late 20s, and if that's the case, their drinking and drug taking may also be at a peak. And if that's the case, accidents are bound to happen. Another theory. Because rock stars become rich and famous in their late 20s, they might feel invincible, causing them to engage in more risky behaviors. Again, accidents will happen. Some may tragically burn out and take their own lives. But let's take a look at some data. I found a study by Australian researchers that was carried out in 2011, not long after Amy Winehouse died. This was published in the British Medical Journal. The study looked at 1,046 British musicians, both solo artists and members of bands. All of them had #1 albums between 1956 and 2007. Of those musicians, 1,046, 71 died. 522 of those were considered to be at risk because of their behaviors and lifestyles. And of those 522, 3 died at the age of 27. I quote, "The 27 Club is unlikely to be a real phenomenon. This study indicates that the 27 Club has been created by a combination of chance and cherry picking." To be fair, there was a slight blip in deaths at the age of 27 as revealed by this study, but there were also similar tiny spikes at age 25 and again at age 32. In fact, a 32 Club has already been convened, and it's bigger than the 27 Club with 8 rock stars who died at the height of their powers. Membership includes John Bonham of Led Zeppelin, Keith Moon of The Who, Karen Carpenter, Mama Cass Elliot, Ricky Wilson of the B-52s, Doug Hopkins of Gin Blossoms, and Keith Godchaux of the Grateful Dead. The price of admission ranges from alcohol poisoning and prescription drug abuse to anorexia, AIDS, and suicide. Here's another study. A list of 3,463 musicians who died between 1908 and 2012 was compiled. There was a dramatic jump in the number of those who died at 26, 29 of them, and those who died at 27. There were 50 of those. But similar numbers also died at 37 and 39. So nothing really special about 27. And another. This study looked at 11,054 musicians who died between 1950 and 2010. Only 1.3% of them died at the age of 27. The age at which to be most afraid? 56. That's when the most died. 2.3% of the musicians in the survey. Going deeper, the study revealed that musicians were just as likely to die at the age of 25, and they were more likely to die at 28 and 30. I have another study. A 2007 study out of Liverpool's John Moores University. More data. About 10% of all artists who died at the age of 27 passed away from natural causes. If we want to look at drugs and alcohol, that's a death rate of 36%, and 30% died in accidents. Another thing to consider is that being a musician is a perilous thing overall. On average, they die sooner than the general population. If we look at life expectancy in the US, the average rock musician dies, like I said, at the age of 56 or thereabouts. That number comes up again and again and again in all the studies I've looked at. Has anyone ever heard of the 56 Club? No? All right, there's Dave Peverett, singer for Foghat, renal cancer. Funkman Rick James, heart attack. Warren Zevon, mesothelioma. Clive Burr, drummer of Iron Maiden. Greg Ridley, drummer with Humble Pie. Ranking Roger of the English Beat and General Public. And I'm not done. Kim Shattuck, singer with the Muffs. Steve Mackey, bass player for Pulp. Singer-songwriter Dan Fogelberg. Country singer Eddie Rabbitt. Bart Walsh, a guitarist with David Lee Roth's band. Grant Hart of Husker Du, Linda McCartney, Paul's wife and member of Wings, Sinead O'Connor, Billy Powell of Lynyrd Skynyrd, Steve Harwell of Smash Mouth, Bryn Merrick of The Damned, Denise Johnson of Primal Scream, and Beethoven, who died at 56. And that's just a partial list of the membership of the unincorporated 56 Club. I could have gone on for a lot longer, but I think I've made my point. Let's take a different approach. It's a bit different if you're a punk. Here's the average life expectancy for an American punk rocker. Just a shade over 40. Metal musicians? About 35. And for rappers and hip-hop artists? Far few make it out of their 20s. Hey, you want a long life as a musician? Take up blues or jazz. According to the actuarial tables, you should make it to 65 easy. Genre, lifestyle, and gender have more to do with early and early-ish passings of musicians than any magic number that might be 27. Let's back up again. The big six of the 27 Club: Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, and Amy Winehouse. Have there been any additions to that club, that echelon, since Amy died in 2012? Listen, all deaths are tragic and sad, and a good number of 27-year-olds have passed since Amy. But the fact is that since Amy, and as of November 1st, 2024, there have been no new members admitted to the 27 Club that are of the stature of those big six. Sorry to say for all those who want to romanticize rock star deaths, but the 27 Club is pretty much a myth. It doesn't exist. There's nothing special about that age other than the fact that six big rock stars died at the age of 27 between 1969 and 2011. However, this does not mean the stories of these six musicians' deaths doesn't deserve examination. Was Brian Jones actually murdered? What were the circumstances of the accidental death of Jimi Hendrix? He once predicted that he would never make it to 28, which is eerie. And Janis Joplin, what might she have done had she lived? Could she have enjoyed her later status as one of the most influential female rock vocalists of all time? Jim Morrison was in a really rough place when he died in 1971. How did he get there? The story of Kurt Cobain continues to provide endless fascination. And the death of Amy Winehouse was so sad because the woman was so talented. Looking at all this data, it's just a coincidence that they all died at the same age. However, there remains a cultural power to these deaths. It says something about young, tortured artists. It says something about someone in their youth being cut down in their prime. It says something about risky behavior and the perils of burning the candle at both ends. And it says something about someone being frozen at a specific age forever when they die. None of the big six in the 27 Club will ever get any older. They will always be remembered for how they looked, how they sounded, and how famous and popular they were in their prime or close to it. They never got a chance to grow old and see their careers fade away. And we never got to see that happen either. As far as we're concerned, Brian, Jimmy, Janis, Kurt, and Amy will be superstars forever, frozen in time at age 27. And it also seems unfair that Keith Richards, Ozzy Osbourne, and Eric Clapton, people who have tempted death with their behavior all their lives, are somehow still with us. That's not a complaint. It's just an observation. Meanwhile, we fans have moved on. We've gotten older, and we're evolving into different human beings with different priorities and lifestyles from when we were younger. We also can't help contrast the big six with the heritage artists that we see today. You can see the psychological pull of all this. I guess we cope with loss in our own ways, and our romanticization of the 27 Club just happens to be one of them. You can catch up on all episodes of Uncharted by downloading them from your favorite podcast platform. If you have any questions or comments about anything you hear on this podcast, shoot me an email through alan@alancross.ca. We can also meet up on all the social media sites along with my website, ajournalofmusicalthings.com, which is updated with music news and recommendations every day. And then there's the free newsletter that you should get. And please check out my other podcast, The Ongoing History of New Music, which deals with rock music at large. There were hundreds and hundreds of episodes that you can enjoy for free. See you next time for more stories of crime and mayhem in the music industry. Episodes arrive every 2 weeks. Technical productions by Rob Johnston. I'm Alan Cross.